Hi, this is Sally Wood for Be Inspired, and today I'm going to be showing you how to do matching footstools. These actually go with the chairs that I made the other day, which I'm hoping to get video of that out before this, but who knows. It's a pillow top. We've done one before, it's just a different design. Let's get on with it. The first thing I'm going to do is remove all of these. It doesn't look like they're going to come out very evenly, which means if they come out like this, like wonky mushrooms, they need to be thrown away. Sometimes you can get them to come out and they'll be straight. So I'm going to work my way around and remove all of this first, and then as I'm going I will be removing the staples at the same time, like that. I just need to remove this top piece on both. It'll take me a little time to work my way all the way around. The time consuming part is taking these out and then putting them back in. Do it carefully because you don't want to be ruining the paintwork or the side trim of the footstool or chair if you're doing a chair. This should come out quite nicely. Okay, so having removed all of this under here and lifted this, I've noticed that it is caught by hand stitching underneath. So I'm going to just pull on those threads like that, mainly so that it doesn't pull up on the cotton wadding. I'll undo this first. This took a little while to undo, but this has already been stitched down. All pillow tops are done differently, so just because you do one doesn't mean to say the next one is going to be identical. That's the nice thing about upholstery, you never know what you're going to get next. Now that should come off. If I pull this back, it's actually been sewn onto another piece of fabric that goes all the way underneath. I'm going to cut this back because I don't need that. I'll be putting a new cover on it, but I'm not going to take anything else out. There's no point in removing that. I'm going to measure this first. That to there is 30. So the center is, let's put a nice big pin here at 15. And then I'm going to measure the back along here. That to there is 30, so here is the center. I'm going to put another pin here. The reason I'm concerned is because this might, see this goes to 30 and a half. I think I'm going to make it an even 30 all the way up. It just brings it in slightly. If that's 15 to there, I'm going to measure that to 15 and a half. Pop that on there. So 15 and a half to that side and bring it down. Just double check that. So that is actually on the pin. Double check, and I'm just going to put a thin pin going that way. That comes over the front. My pin is here. Again, measure from the pin mark, which I can feel under my finger, to the edge. I'm going to pull this fabric around, still a little bit over. This is so that this fabric is square on, which is important, I think. Double check both front and back again. Pin the back side like that, and again at the front, because things twist when you're messing with them. I'm going to start pinning at the front. All I'm doing is putting my pins on the join of the piping and the fabric. I will work my way around as evenly as I can, because this is going to be my new sew line. Just pat it, don't pull it, just pat it into place. Put the pins on that join. If you want to make sure that you're not moving it, you can always put extra pins in the corners. Just poke them into the cushion and they'll be fine. Make your way all the way around. Just make sure it's on that sew line. And try to get all your pins going in the same direction if you can. It's a lot easier later when you're trying to work your way around. If they're all going the same way, you only get pinned in one direction, not in both, which unfortunately often happens in this job. This is a slightly rounded corner, so I'll see if I can keep that going exactly the same way. I prefer sharp corners because they're easier to line up. You see that comes round. I know this isn't going to be even here because it comes in, so I'm going to just leave it, and this is my cut line. Along the back, I've got a similar problem as I come around here. So what I'm going to do, go into the center. I'm going to just put a pin in there to hold it. As I'm working one side, it won't pull it over. Work back towards that point. It's almost mirroring the front of the cushion, but it's a slightly deeper curve. If you're not sure how everything's going, pull the side of the cushion up so you can get into where the stitching is, like that. And it is slightly rounded, so let's round that slightly, but not too much. Each time these get cut, they get cut slightly differently. That's why you need to make your own pattern. that should give me 1/2 inch seam allowance here all the way down to the bottom. So I've put these pins in here. I'm going to just carry on going around like this to the other side, and then I've got one really good template. Sometimes what I do is I don't actually do both sides. I'll measure out to a certain point and fold the pattern in half. Once I've got all the way around, I'm going to move this, take that out and that out because they're no longer needed in there. Before I start, I'm going to make sure that these pins and these pins are basically in line. And I'm also going to make sure the center here, maybe it's the way, okay, so if I put that on there, it is actually 1/2 inch. It's the way it looks on the other side. So if I put that to there, my 1/2 inch is actually over here. Just double check that that's where it should be. And it's basically spot on. Maybe a little bit more over, but not much. So whatever this measurement here is, it's about 16. Make sure that it's the same up there. So I'm happy that is absolutely centered. It's a little bit over, but that'll be fine. Now I'm going to cut the selvage off all the way up because that's my cut line for the other side. It should be almost even. And then when I fold it over, I know that's where I'm cutting to. You might not be able to see, but there's a difference in colour there. That's why I was concerned. The other thing I'm going to do, I'm going to start cutting 1/2 inch away from those pin marks like this. Now I'm only doing one side of the fabric, I'm not doing both sides until I have this done. Now with luck, the underside will be the same. I'm going to make it go a little bit round like that, and if I pull this back, these pins are basically on top of the ones underneath, so I'm going to disregard the ones underneath and just go with the ones on top, which means I'm going to just take all of these pins out for now so it's nice and flat. This fabric is a little bit stretchy, so it tends to roll a little bit more than it usually does. Just remember, all fabrics are different. I'd only pin the front and the back, so all measurements are to go from here. I've popped all of this back down into place. The first thing I'm going to do is put my center mark on. I don't have to worry about that anymore, it's there. Then I'm just going to come around and cut the bottom half to match the top, holding it in place as I go. And I'm going to follow this around like this, and then up. Move it down carefully. I don't want to adjust anything. Straighten this out. This fabric's not on a roll, it's just being folded over. So I'm going to pull that back so it's not all underneath here. And because it's awkward to see, all I'm going to do is cut back slightly. I'm giving it a generous inch all the way around here. Again, here are all corresponding to the top here and round, which is good. This one looks like it comes out slightly compared to the one underneath, but the front is even. Put my center mark there. I'm cutting this back to about 1/4 inch, and it should match the other 1/2 inch. I'll keep my pins in for now while I'm working this out. The cushion itself kind of overhung it in places, and personally I like a nice tight cushion, but that's just my own preference. So that goes back to the 1/2 inch there. If I measure from here out, it would be 1/2 inch. Yep, perfect. So I'm going to take all of these pins out and then match the bottom half to the top half, all the way around, down the side, and I should meet up down here, exactly where I want to be. I've got one top, I need to cut another matching. I've placed the original top face down so it's easier for you to see. I'm cutting round, I've put my center mark in like that, and I'm just going to cut up. And then on around this side to the top, and then I'll finish up. Remember to put the center mark at the top as well. I'm going to cut out 3 pieces of piping per top, so I need 6 pieces. I'm going to cut out the piping first to see if I've got the extra fabric on the side that's wastage at the moment to use for the underside of the cushions. It's a bit of a painstaking job, but worth doing. I am cutting my piping on the bias. Because there's curves on this cushion, it's easier to go around if it's already on the bias. So this is the second set, both tops. I might just cut enough for the tops and work out how much I really need. This is what I cut off for the seats that they went with. I want them to match the chairs that I already made. 4.5 inches and 2 borders each. Nice and easy. I'm just going to measure that and run the outside edge of my ruler along this straight edge here. On each one I'm going to cut that bottom corner off. I'm to do this one and the subsequent ones, cut that off. Then I know that that is the downside, because this is crushed velvet. Some of it's lovely and smooth the other way, but I chose this side to be the down, so it should be even. The nice thing about cutting the flange for the piping, or the cover for the piping, if you've got one end, is you can just go to the opposite end, and then here with the salvage I can just pop that over and sew corner to corner. It's a bit wonky, it did its own thing. I'm going to pop the stitch up to 2.8. It's still small enough to hide everything, and I'm just going corner to corner. Fold the next one up like that and sew the next one in. There's the salvage. It goes at right angles, not perfect, but as long as it's almost there, it's fine. And I'm just going to sew these into one long length. I'm going to use a piping foot. It has a groove. I'm going to start at the salvage end of the cord, and somewhere. I've got some left over from the last project. I'll join this. So seeing as I'm joining it on, I've sewn the two pieces together like that. Cut them back, lengthen the stitch to the longest, which is number 5, pop that underneath, flatten this seam out as well as I can and fold that on round, and I'll carry on sewing. When I get closer to the seam, just double check that everything is where it needs to be, cinch it in. When I get to the join, I clip the two pieces apart and cut that back like I did earlier. Sew towards the join, flatten the join out and sew over it. If you have thick fabric, always cinch it right into that fold in the fabric. Makes it easier when you're applying it to the cushions. I'm starting on the side where it's nice and straight, because joining up is usually easier that way. But the main reason is I didn't want to have a join along the front. So my join is here, and the next join will be just around the corner. Most people sit on the fronts of things if they're going to sit anywhere. So try to bear that in mind. And I'm just going to sew this in all the way around with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Still on the longest stitch, you don't need to change that. So here we come down to that first corner. The corner is a little bit too sharp with this fabric, so I'm just going to cut a few clips in like that so that it will go round nice and evenly. Hold it straight until you almost get to the corner. As you come into the corner, then you fold your fabric round. Keep this outside edge as close as you can to your 1/2 inch mark as you go around. Now it does sometimes move, don't worry too much, but just try your best. Some fabrics don't mind turning, but others are horrible. The rest of this is just going to fold and do what it needs to do as we get there. Keep the fabric on the base as flat as you can, because if you do that, then you're not pulling anything out of kilter as you go. Not only that, if you keep this on your marking, as you sew, the piping will kind of move to where you want it to go. It wants to stay in that groove on the piping foot. And as I come into this corner, again, I'm just going to put some nicks in it so it goes round nice and evenly. Now I'm going to be straightening up to go along this side. I'll work around to the back. As I come to the back of this cushion, I'm going to have the same problem. It's not going to want to go round very easily. It curls up. I'm going to put a number of nicks in. They go right past where I want it to go. So it shouldn't really pull on the fabric. So I'll keep that straight. As I come round, it will go into place. Rotate the fabric round. It should hold. Because this is coming on the bias, you don't want to be pulling on that either. So keep the fabric flat on the base of the sewing machine. And rotate into position. Because this is on the bias, it will adapt to the shape I want it to go in, and then it'll come on out. There's a join right in the back, it's not in the centre back, so that's pretty good. It wouldn't have mattered along the back if it was, as long as it's not on the corners. Coming round the other way, make some clips so it can go around the corner. That should be enough, I think. Because I don't want the clips going too far, because I've got a join there. If they go too far, it's awkward to join that. It's not impossible, it just makes it more awkward, that's all. There we go. Rotate it round, allow the fabric to straighten up. Here's my join, so my last clip is here. I'm just going to go over it slightly. Okay, I've got the base cut out, but I want to save some fabric. So what I'm going to do is pin this to the sides. I'm going to take it to the outside edge here, even that out a little bit like that. Put some pins in. Now I'm doing the wider sides first, because this comes in, I've measured the distance from here to here all the way along, so it's in a straight line. It's always easier to put these sections in if you do that. I've just sewn this one and this one in, about half a foot width in, pop that over the side, pin that also. I'm going to fold this side piece over. It just needs to be like 1/4 of an inch. It doesn't even have to be straight, to be really honest with you. It's just got to be there. There we go. Pop that like that. Because this is velvet, it will walk slightly, but hopefully it won't walk too badly. Now that I'm at the end, I'm going to put the needle down, lift the foot up, twist the fabric, oops, pop the foot down, and keeping this as straight as possible. So what I'm going to do, pinch where the other pin is and pull that tight. Now you want both parts of the foot running on velvet because it pushes the velvet out of the way otherwise. Again, remove that pin and hold this tight. I'm going to get onto the velvet there, needle down, twist the fabric, make sure everything's flat. I'm just going to pop that back under a little way, use that and push it under as I go. That works. Because I didn't quite catch it under there, I'm going to bring my stitching out like that, straighten it up, and then continue stitching so this fold is held into place. And now I'm going to repeat that on the other side. Here's the underside for the footstool. Pop this over the top, make sure that that goes to the back. When I'm happy with the position, I'm going to mark my centre mark like that, and then cut on round so that I have a matching pair. I'm going to measure 4.5 inches in and mark it. So there's the centre. Let it follow the outside edge of the cushion, and then very carefully join your marks up until you've got all the way around. It doesn't have to be perfect, nobody's going to see this. This is your sew line for when you add the pieces together, but it is very important. You could do this after you've sewn the piping on the side, that's entirely up to you. The other thing you need to do is mark through your centres. So once you know where your centres are, put a line like that through both sides. I'm still going to mark it at 4.5. Draw a straight line through there. Join that one up and just carry on round. So I've got the new base under here, and I'm going to just apply the piping the same way as usual, and I'm going to put it on the straight side, so that's the easiest place to join it. I'm going to just sew on around. I've got it on the longest stitch, and move that down just a wee tad. And just like I did on the top, I'm going to put some cuts in so that I can get around this edge here. You can pin it if you want, but I haven't pinned it because I shouldn't need to. If I keep both of these fabrics taut and move them together, they should go. Now when I first started out, I would actually do stitching all the way around just to make sure that everything held in place. That's really up to you. And as I get round, I'm just going to straighten up. Because this is the bottom, I'm not going to worry about the fact there's a join there. Nobody will see it. And I'll just make my way on around. Just going to seal this up. I've cut both of these matching with an overlap of about 1/2 inch, I think. Find the center of that, fold the fabric. That brings the two pieces closer. I'm going to overlap them like that. It's about 1 foot width, I think. Pop that under there. Reduce the stitch length to a 2.6 so it's nice and short. And then sew across corner to corner. Double check that it goes across there without any gapping, without any rippling. I've extended the stitch. I'm going to open the join up like that, pop the piping underneath, and I'm going to cut this back just below the join because I don't like the joins all being together. Sew that into place. Pull that out slightly, peek underneath to see where the join is, and it's about there, and I'm going to cut this piece off to match it like that, and then I'm going to tuck that one on top of there, fold the join over and sew. Readjust as you go and go to the end. Once that's done, you start at the top end. There's the join, so I've overlapped it. Pull everything into position and sew down. I'm now going to put the base on. I marked both of them with this for the front because it's easy to get turned around. This line here I'm going to actually bring down to that 7.5 mark there. There's a line that goes along here, so I'm just going to move this on top of that line. I'm going to put my finger here. Now the back also has a centre mark, and I'm going to move that into the centre of this as it comes down, and then that's lined up for pinning out here. Double check and then just pin into place. Because this white stuff doesn't move, I'm going to have to put my fingers underneath so I can make sure that all the pins come out, and pin the back one into place as well. Then I do the corners like that so that it's nice and straight, then into the centres of those laces. I'll carry on round. If you're matching patterns for the cushions, I've got my front markings here. It looks like this one has to come back slightly. Is that far enough forward? I'll wriggle that back, and I'm going to line the front border here with the piping like that at the same position, which isn't too far back. I'm also going to make sure my centre is on my centre mark. That looks about right. It's a little further back. There we go. And here again, I'm just going to put a pin in here to hold it, hand underneath, so I know that that's in the right place. Remove the top one because I don't need that anymore. As I did with the first one, I'm going to pull that back. Double check that's on the centre, double check that's on the centre, and again pin that into place. Once that's done, do the corners first, make sure the corners are in line, and then the centres of each piece. You don't need to overpin these, they usually hold quite well. I've put a walking foot on. You can do this with a plain foot, and all I'm going to do is roll all of this and slide it under here. Where I've drew the lines when I was setting all of this up, I'm going to sew down my pen marks and make sure that you can move everything around. I will do from the back, so that's the side. I usually go from the back to the front and then back round. I don't know why I do that. Maybe that's the way I was taught. There's my centre mark here, and there's my sew line. So I'm going to pop the foot down on there. I can remove the pin when I'm ready. I've got it on the longest stitch, and I am going to just start sewing. I'll put a few stitches in first. The walking foot will aid the manoeuvring of the fabric, but otherwise you're going to have to, especially if you've got this fake leather, can't move it through. A flatbed industrial machine would do this better than this domestic, but not everybody has an industrial machine. Like with anything else, you put the needle down when you come to any corners, lift the foot up and pivot it around that point. You don't, on the first round or the second, because I'm going to do this twice, really need to be on the lines. The lines that you drew are literally for guide. You just need to make sure that you've got quite a bit of depth from the outside piping to where it's joined together. Otherwise you don't get a nice pillow top look. Now I'm going to do down here. This fabric is more awkward than anything else because it doesn't give. And then just on down. Then I'm going to go around again, maybe nearly 1/4 of an inch from the inside edge. Then I know that everything's been caught down, as you have just done on the inside. I noticed when I went round and I checked, but I'd missed this edge. That's why I'm going on the outside. Sometimes I go on the inside. I'm going to make sure I catch all of that down on my second way round. That's done that side, and I'll double check on the other side. Pull the front fabric away from the back fabric like that towards the corner and cut. And I'm going to cut this piece out all the way around. Now that I've got the centre out, I'm going to cut into each corner. I try to do wonky lines because then it's easier to sew them together. This is important because I need to get to the other side. I'm going to roll all of these side pieces into the centre like this. Here's the base, here's the top. Pop that on. I'm going to line my centre to my centre, which is there, and I've marked the centre of the border as well. Put a pin in here just to hold it. This side hasn't been sewn, so I'm not going to worry about that. Move to the side, and I have a join here, so I'm going to put the top and the bottom down on top of each other and work out where the join is, which is here. Put the join there, pin it. I will double check that. Here is the corner, and here is the corner, so I'm going to pop the corner and the corner in together like that. It's going to ripple slightly, it always does. And these I'm going to double check as I go around because they might walk slightly. Basically that's my corner, my centre, my join. My next corner is here. This is why I actually prefer to have sharp corners, because the sharp corner you can fold like that and line in. A rounded corner you kind of have to manoeuvre until you think it's in. I think that's about there. And as I sew I will alter them. Now along the back, did I mark the centre? I know I marked the top centre.
there's the centre there. I should have done that. But basically the centre is probably, if I fold along there so it's straight, it's here. So that centre mark has to line up with this one. Pop that one there, pin it. And then again here I've got my corner. So again, I'm going to put my corners and pin it in. Looks so easy. Wait till you start sewing. This is my start mark, so I'm going to fold that back so it's a nice even fold across. I'm going to pin that like that. I'm going to place this bottom corner here as it bends around, and my start mark is opposite where I'd finished. So all of this is in line, so my start mark is here, so I'm going to bring that up, put my finger there, pop that there, fold that back and pin that, and everything with a bit of luck should fall in place, but I will double check all of my measurements as I go around. See that? That's more or less in place. Just a little alteration, but that might alter as I sew it, so I'm going to leave that. Slide that carefully underneath. I'm going to start a little way in front of that pin mark. It won't make much difference. Pop it down, it's on the longest stitch, move the pin, line everything up, and sew. As I come to the first corner, which seems to be in line, I'm going to move the pin so it's easier to maneuver everything around. As I come out of this corner and into the back, I'm going to pull this fabric round so it's level with there, and sew. I'm going to do it in little bite-sized pieces because it is easy to not go in straight. You can see it's trying to pull. So I'm going to pull this back round here so that it pulls in, and here it's rippled and the other side it's straight. Again, I'm going to move the fabric, pull that on round, pinch it in, make sure that the fabric on the back is going in flat. With luck, this will go into the centre. I say with luck because I don't want it to miss. Here's my centre mark, and I need that to be as close to the centre as possible. As I come into the centre, I need the two fabrics to be as close as possible to each other. Doesn't have to be perfect. Push this fabric underneath so it doesn't get caught. And now I'm going to aim for this corner here, so I'm going to pull the fabric out so I can get all the way along the back here. Sometimes, even though you cut a mirror image, it might not quite match up. You always have to get it as close as possible. Pull that back slightly so it's still in line. Because it's rounded, it's going to do its own thing to a certain extent. Pull that back. As I get to this corner, I'm going to pull the pin so that I've got the freedom to move the fabrics around, and I'm going to sew it into there before I turn it. Alter the fabric underneath. This fake leather is a little bit awkward sometimes. Make sure all your clipped pieces of piping are facing the right way. Sometimes they get caught underneath. And then on round. As I'm coming here, it's a little bit gappy, so I'm going to remove the pin and pinch it on the far end, and when I do that it all comes into place, so that might have just been slightly off. I'm going to carry on sewing here. Just keep pinching it in place and it should always go where you want it. It doesn't necessarily happen, but it should. Get a little bit closer to that corner that I need to go around. Remove the pin and get ready to move everything under there. In this case it was easier to put the bottom on because it's just one sheet and it doesn't have sides to it. Twist all the side up so this can roll into place. That should just pull in line to the centre, which it does. When you just pull it in a straight line it doesn't look like it'll fit, but because it's got shaping it should. So if you pulled slightly on the top, if you don't think it's going to all fit in, that's okay too. That's quite a ways out. I'm going to undo this because, oh actually it's not, it's almost there. So I'm going to just pull the top slightly and into place. Because it's just a wee tad out, I'm going to pull it a little bit more on this side to make it more even. This part is not attached to the top, it's only being attached to the base. I'm just going to carry on round until I can tidy up the sides. Keep moving the fabric, adjusting. Push all of that underneath and then get to that corner. Turn around again. I'm going to sew just a little way further up. Stop about 4 inches, 10 centimeters from the end here. Here's the top, here's the bottom. I'm going to cut this side back to the end of the selvage here. It's a little bit uneven, so I'm going to take it back a little bit more, cut straight across. Then, all I'm going to do, pull this fabric to the top so it's more even, and fold it underneath there, like that. And that is going to be my seam. Once I've worked out where that's going to be cut, more or less, fold it so the edges are against each other. You should get a straight line that way. You roll the two pieces together until the raw edges are even, and you pinch that into the seam below the piping. If you pinch it to the piping, you're going to have a little bit of extra fabric. Not a huge amount. Most times it doesn't matter, but sometimes it does. But in this case, you're going to pinch it right down to the flange. Put a pin in at that mark, and that's going to be your new seam line. Measure your seam allowance. If it's not a standard size, just pop it under here and work out where you're going to be going to. For me, it's on the outside of here. So I'm going to line everything up with that. Fold the fabric over so that you have more play with the border, and slide that into, so I can actually see the pin marks, which make it a lot easier to do. Just put the needle down, put the foot down, got to move that. Velvet walks, so that's why I'm being a little bit extra cautious. Put the needle down, put the foot down. I am actually going to do forward and reverse, and then all the way across. Because it's crushed velvet, it really is walking. It doesn't want to go in a straight line. Reverse at the bottom there. As I pull this out, it pulls in nicely. I'm going to pop it back here so it goes under. I re-sew over the original stitches, pull it into line like that, straighten it up, and then sew. Make sure the seam is open because it looks flatter on the side of the cushion if you do that. I've finished sewing up here, so I've got a little bit further to go. Make sure it's all sewn in. You don't want any gaps. There we go, over sewed. I'm going to finish off the top, so I'm just going to line up this corner here with this corner. Make sure it goes along the bottom evenly and along the side there. Sometimes you need to shake it out a bit. That's about right. I'm going to put a pin in just to hold it so it doesn't walk too much. Pop this top underneath. Put that down. Make sure I'm over stitching and pull that into line. Pinch at the corner, make sure everything's back in line. Open that, that needs to be flat. At this point it's just adjusting everything because you've got the base and the top and bottom of the cushion. Usually it's a fabric that's not so rigid, so the white fabric just holds it in strange positions because it doesn't give very well. Okay, so I'm coming into my corner, remove that so I've got the ability to move everything around and twist and sew in. Try to make sure the top goes in flat and then you don't have any ripples. And again, I've got my centre mark and that I'm going to pull the top slightly against the bottom so it goes in. A little bit of gapping going on, not too much. And check. I wasn't quite so lucky on here. It has a pleat, so I think I've got to get rid of that. Just undo that and work it in again. That sometimes happens. But I'll have a look on the other side. It might not be so obvious. I've just turned this inside out because I'm worried about that pleat. The pleat is right here. And when it's on, actually you can't even see it, I feel it here. It's right here on the outside. Because it is on the outside of the curve, it's going to be hidden quite well. So I'm just going to load this up with its cushion. This is under the pillow top, so I'm going to undo that. Because it's got feathers in it, I'm actually going to just cut this out because I don't want to be messing too much. I'm going to go around here to get this out. Because of the dust, that's why I always do that, because it makes my face itch. Pull that out, and I always do this carefully. Usually I turn the bottom, which is this, to the top, but this has a ridge in it, so to turn it over would mean there's a ridge on the top of the cushion, which is not what I want. So I'm going to just check that everything's in line. Sometimes they roll. I think this one looked pretty good. This one probably hasn't been used. The other one was quite rolled over, so I had to maneuver it back into shape. This is the cover it's going in. Make sure that all of the corners are out where they should be. Any threads there can be cut later. Put the top down. And I'm going to pull this back and start pushing the front in first. This is why I always do a cross and not a diagonal, because I don't like messing with things. I'm going to wriggle the front in, pull this out because that needs to be sewn into place in a minute. Push it all back and then start pushing these corners in as well. That's there. Turn it around and into there. And I'm going to wriggle that until it looks perfect. Here's the top, more or less in there. So I'm going to maneuver that corner, this one and this one before I sew it in. I have a piece of fabric which I'm going to put into all 4 corners. It might not meet all the way, but that'll be fine because this has to be pulled in anyway. Fold the 4 sides up like that. I'm going to start in the corners first. I'm going to pull that one into place where I think it's into place. It doesn't have to be perfect to start off with. And then I'm going to pull that one in like that. The lines here line up. That's what I'm looking for. It's open. That's fine. It won't be when I've finished. I'm going to work my way around all 4 corners, doing the same thing. Once those are in place, I'm going to pull it to the center, or where I think the center is. It doesn't have to be dead on at the moment. That one in there. And you'll see that I've cut funny shapes. That helps me keep everything in line. There's my 4 corners more or less in the center, and I'll work from one end to another. This looks like the easiest piece to put in. Doesn't necessarily mean it is. And pull those pieces together. I'm literally going to go down across the under fabric, not the feather, because I want to be able to move this against there if I need to. There's my first stitch, and I'm just going to go straight across and back underneath. When I pull it, I just pull it so that this is shut. It doesn't have a ridge on it. It's maybe ½ an inch either side of the cut. As I bring this round, this has to join, and bring that down to there. It's quite awkward not to get the fabric underneath. Just take your time if you're doing it this way. The little tap noise is where I'm slightly catching on the actual pillow. The tap is when it releases. Just barely gets it. It's a time consuming thing, but I prefer to do it this way. That pin can come out, pop up there, because that can come on round. They're going to be lined up like that. I put a fabric underneath because that holds everything stable. There we go. I've got that piece in. My next piece that I'm aiming for is here. There's a little split there. Put those 2 together and hold it and carry on going. Done this one. Now I'm going to pull this one in. I usually do the most obvious ones first. I'm going to push this down into the corner. When you're sewing these, the fabric underneath moves. That's fine because that's the bit I want to move. Here I'm starting it like this. Pull that and that in together, and that should go in flat, and then the rest should just follow. Readjust as you go, and once I've got the first section, I'll look for the next section that matches. Here we go. I've marked the center front, which is actually in line with here. Here's my center here, and I'm just going to pull it down and put my first staple in, but I'm going to tip it down so that it goes down into place. And then I am going to turn it around and do the same on the back side. This is the back, and it really doesn't want to go. This is actually going to be quite difficult because of the fabric it is. What I'm going to do is cut up here on my center mark just a little bit, and then I'm going to do clips like that to start off with. The reason why I went up the center mark is because I want that to be in the center. Maybe I can take it closer. By cutting up, that releases this to go out. I just don't want to cut too far because I don't want to cut into the top part of here. I need to get it in the right place. Now that that's in, I'm going to cut round slightly. I'm going to be a little bit generous. I don't want to be too tight. I'll work the front in first. I think that's stable enough for me to do, and cut that on round. As long as it's out of the way, not close enough to interact with the ridge here, I'll be fine. I'm going to pull this down, but not very hard, and into the center, because I need to take all of this fabric and make it go in really smooth. I'm going to work from one side and then the other until it's all in on the front here. This is raised at the moment, but once people start sitting on it, it'll all go back into shape. And I'll be putting trim on, so I'm not going to worry too much at the moment about what these look like. And again on this side. There we go. Nice and even. There's a little bit of padding missing, so I've got some cotton wadding. I'm just going to pop that there underneath, and then, oops, a daisy, can't be too much because I don't want it to look lumpy. And then I'm going to bring this down and into place. You can see I've just cut back here, which allows the fabric to move and get shaped. Pull this into place. They could be fine. Massage it a little bit and it'll be perfect. I'm going to bring this in here, but then when I get to here, I'm going to leave it. Cut along that ridge there, pull that down, just a little bit more in here, and then across. I'm just going to cut it out here because I don't want to go in too close. There we go. That's there. This has to go up and into place. See if I can smooth that little join out a little bit so it's not so knobbly, because there's a bit missing there. A little piece like that. Push it up and into place and massage it into place. Sounds a bit weird, I know. I'll put 2 more in here because I think when that pulls down, it'll all come into place and I won't have to move them. So now I'll do the other side. This is the side, which on this is nice and flat, so it should go in nice and easy. I'm going to start in the middle and then work across. I've got the corner put here, and I'm going to bring this down just slightly, so this will pull back and come in line with a bit of luck. I say a bit of luck because it might not. Put a staple here. This one doesn't have to be particularly low. I'm going to pull this down and fold it so that it comes in line with the corner here. Although this doesn't go in line, I'm thinking it will be fine because the pattern comes out and goes in. Brought this round here. I'm going to start on the outside edge. I don't usually. It curves in, so I want to make sure that everything's even. I have the center marked already. I've also put a little bit extra padding on the corner. This one here. And just fold this down and into place. It will pull around. So get that in. I'm going to trim as I go to make sure that it goes into shape. I'm going to pull it into the center here. I haven't done one of these in a very long time. Putting the fabric into this point here to make sure that it goes in even. I might have to adjust this. I'm going to put a little bit of a pleat here, but not too much because I don't want it coming in here too much. Trim it as I go. I put a few more in and pulled it around. Cut this bit back too. As I move, I'm going to pull it towards this way. Usually you pull it towards the center, but you've got to pull it towards the outside. I'm not pulling it very much. I'm just giving it a little tug towards there, and hopefully this wrinkling will disappear. It's starting to go away. I'm going to cut back along here to give it a little bit more stretch, and again just pull it slightly out. I think when I pull this side in, it will just pull all of this out. Come around the corner and I'm going to pop that into place. Pull it to the corner like I did on the other side of this. Cut it all back. The cutting back's the important part because without cutting it back, you're not going to be able to maneuver your fabric around. I need to get right in there. I'm going to just pull it into the side here. Not too much, flat to start off with. And then in to that side. Again, I'm going to just pull it slightly this way. Put all this back. Then this should bring this in so it's nice and even without too much rippling. Here where it's stippled, it's going to look a bit odd anyway, but there's not much I can do about that. That's just the way the pattern is. There's a little bit here and a little bit on there, but it's even, and it really is because of this is quite patterned. Tidy that up. I've already started, but what I do is I prefer to use a band, and I cut it at 1.5 inches, and I lay my tape measure over. I prefer to put each tack at about 1 inch for each center. I can fold the band as I go. I just find this is an easy way. Very rarely do items with tacks, and I've done 3 in the past couple of months, so maybe I ought to go and invest in one of those gadgets to put them in, and then I won't have any for a long time again. Here's my center. Always work from the center out. Even if you end up working from one side up, always make sure you've got your center marked. It just goes in more evenly. Not only that, if you have a corner and you've got 2 tacks that are quite close, that's acceptable. As you get round, and if you had 2 tacks next to each other in the center back, that's unacceptable. That's why I would advise you to do it this way. Especially if you're doing it 1 inch apart, you don't want to make it obvious that you made a mistake. Try to keep the band even. It's not imperative, it just makes it look neater if it's kept even. And that's why I always choose 1.5 inches, because it gives a nice finish. Having centered this, I've come around the corner, and although this is a little bit close to that one, I'm not going to worry. The reason I'm going to start at this end and move towards there is so that the trim can be pulled firm. Because it's a straight line, it's a little bit easier. You can do it either way. I mean, sometimes I start in the middle and move out, and sometimes I'll start at one end and move across. But I always start the front in the center. There's something under here that's caused that to go. In the big scheme of things, nobody's going to notice it. This is the back. Here's my center. I'm just going to bring this around the corner. I'm going to roll everything in. I'm going to double check so I don't start in the wrong place. Put my first one here, and then I'll go back to the corner. So there's that one. But there's a big gap here, so I'm going to put one right on that corner too. And that will happen on the other side, so it'll be nice and evenly spaced. I'm going to make my way to the center back because I need to join these two pieces up. Here's my center, and I've just cut one side 1/8 of an inch over. The other will be folded in behind, but I need to bring this down a little bit further before I start even thinking about folding all of that in. I'm going to roll them in together like that. I always go down first and then up. Hopefully that will come in really tight. It's a bit too much, so I'm going to cut a little bit more out of here because that's all going to be in here. Put that in and roll it. I'm going to put the one in the middle in first to hold everything, then I'll do either side. Although it's not perfect, the tack will hide most of the join, and lots of people don't even notice. And that's done. Thank you for joining me on this little project. I hope that I've imparted some information that's useful to you. If you want to hear more from me, please subscribe, hit the bell button, and a few thumbs up would be excellent. Let me know how I'm getting on. And in the meantime, take care. See you later. Ciao.